Hello, everyone. Welcome to In the Know with Dr. Aidoo. I hope that you're well. I bet that you are excited because it's eating season and, of course, being thankful and all of that. But anyway, I am excited and already feel very thankful because I get to bring you another spotlight interview. And this time it's with Dr. Pierre Rodgers. He is the academic program co-coordinator for the Sport and Recreation Studies program. It's our grad program, but he has a lot more going on, but I'm going to let him tell you himself. So let's welcome Dr. Rodgers.
Oh my
And I'll give
goodness.
you one of these. This
I'm
is the
very
In the Know. Welcome.
I'm very touched. Thank you so much, Dr. Aidoo.
Okay, so as I indicated,
Yes.
you wear many hats. So can we start off by you telling us how long you have been at Mason and what is your role or roles in the School of Sport, Recreation, and Tourism Management?
Oh my goodness. How much time do you have? Um,
Take it away.
it's such a good question because I was thinking about this, and it makes me feel extremely old, but I think I've been at Mason since gosh, maybe about 16, 17 years. And
Okay.
certainly the time kind of flies by. Right before I was officially in, at the time, recreation, health, and tourism,
Right.
I was still a full-time faculty member in communication studies at Morgan State University.
Okay.
So on occasion, I served as an adjunct in a communication course at Mason. So
Oh,
I kind of had a little semblance of the university,
hmm.
but I was all in when I became affiliated with then RHT and our current school, sport, recreation, and tourism management. Uh, my area of study, research, teaching, I like to consider it broadly sports studies.
Okay.
Technically, I am a faculty member and a colleague in sport management.
Hmm.
But as my predecessor and former school director, Dave Wiggins, might say, people saw him as a sport historian, which he was,
Right.
but he was also under sport management.
Uh-huh.
So I mentioned, my background in my previous school at Morgan in communication. So what I bring to the table, what I brought to the table back in the day
Right.
was a kind of eclectic look at sport
Hmm.
because unlike you and so many of my colleagues in SRTM, I'm probably one of the rare and few faculty members who isn't who doesn't have a terminal degree in sport or
Okay.
recreation or
Right.
tourism. So everything I've studied had been in communication, speech communication, uh, critical analysis. But part of what I did was doing study of African Americans. So I've always been interested in race. I've
Okay.
always been interested in culture. I've
Hmm.
always been interested in popular music, popular culture,
Right.
and gender. And along those lines, with African Americans, I also had an interest in African American sport. So
Mm.
we fast forward to how the heck did I get to Mason and in this program? At the time, they were looking for someone to teach different types of courses in sport, but not necessarily hardcore sport management courses. So they were looking for people to teach maybe sport communication or sport and film or
Okay.
sport and social issues.
Uh-huh.
So even though I'd never taught specifically those types of courses, with my background and my skill set, I was able to fairly quickly adapt to that.
Right.
and I never looked back. I've had some welcoming colleagues in SRTM, very inviting, very encouraging,
Right.
helping me when I didn't know exactly what I was doing. And that goes for my colleagues and for my students as well. So it's been a fun ride, and
Right.
I've really enjoyed it so far.
Well, really, really nice. I was just thinking today, it's getting close to about 13 years when I came for my interview. And I remember you were one of the people I met when we did that faculty
I remember
sit
that.
down. Yep.
Yes.
13 years. Can you believe that?
Oh my
Uh,
gosh. Where did the time go?
exactly. So you kind of have dipped into my next two questions, but I want a little more detail. So
Yeah.
your educational background is in communication,
Hmm.
but with these additional pieces to it. Can you tell us a little bit more about your educational background, what school, and what led you to communication, and then now where you are in main?
Sure. Sure.
Yes.
Well, you know very well in my current office and in my previous office at the SciTech campus, I am a proud graduate of the University of Alabama. Roll Tide, Roll
I
Tide,
shall
Roll.
not hold that against
All
you.
right, well, be
I
that
shall
as it
not.
may, be that as it may. But I went to Alabama where I got my undergraduate degree, my
Right.
bachelor of arts in speech communication.
Okay.
Then later, it's like, hey, let's keep doing this. So I got a master's degree in communication studies from Memphis State University, now University of Memphis, and
Okay.
then I got my PhD in speech communication from Penn State University. Uh,
Oh, yeah.
I'm born in, the great state of Alabama, Birmingham. Tuscaloosa is where Alabama is located. And so as a school, it was far enough away to be away from home,
Yeah.
but I could hop in the car with my laundry and or books
Of
and be
course.
home in 30, 40 minutes. So,
Of
I had my space and my distance, but it was nice to have that. Um, the idea of communication, I I swear I do think about our students and how many of them sort of fell into tourism or
Mhm.
fell into sport management or recreation, because when I say they fell into it, they might have stumbled into an intro course,
Mhm.
or maybe one for one of their core courses. And many times students will find it and, like, I never knew this existed,
Right.
fall in love with it and do it. I was in a semi-similar situation. This is one of those cases that when I was in elementary school and high school, you know how I'm sure you were the same way. You paid attention to your teachers. You did
I
what your
tried.
teachers told you to do. So when my teachers would say, "Pierre, you ought to be in journalism," it's like, huh, okay. And I guess what they were thinking at the time, I like to write,
Mhm.
didn't really like to talk a lot, which is ironic because I'm in speech communication, but that's neither here nor there. But I like to write. And so I did writing for my elementary school paper. And then in high school, I was a writer for the school paper, ended
Mhm.
up being an assistant editor. So the next logical step would be, hey, I guess I'm going into journalism. So looked at a number of schools and decided on Alabama. And I was a journalism and mass communication major. But here's where the plot thickens. Like
Okay.
most students in the very first semester, you typically take some of your core courses and
Mhm.
maybe you dip into your major. And I took my intro to mass communication course, but
Mhm.
I hit a roadblock. Uh, I couldn't take any other courses in my major in the spring semester and thereafter because there was this little sticky rule. it seemed that majors needed typing proficiency. So
Right.
yes, all this time when I
Oh,
was an undergrad, well, a freshman, did not know how to type. Oh my God. I think about those early English assignments where
mhm,
I had to get my papers done super early so I can find and look on that blackboard, bulletin board to see,
mhm.
okay, what people are typists that could get my stuff in and whatever.
Wow.
So I didn't know how to type. So it's like, okay, well, what do I do now? I didn't have a lot of choice, so I couldn't take any journalism courses in spring. I, loaded up on the rest of my core. And
Right.
then, like, again, our students wouldn't understand this because this is pre-computer. Went
Mm,
in the paper catalog and I started flicking, I gotta take something. I gotta get a full load. And then I stumbled across this course, Introduction to Speech Communication, and it
mhm.
kind of intrigued me. Like when I
Right.
saw the description, the study of the interplay of spoken and written discourse, working to share and create knowledge with others. And for
Right.
whatever reason, it's like, huh, it seemed intriguing. So I took the course. Now, by the way, I also took an intro course to typing. So
Oh,
I
good.
had to do that. Had to do that. But the moral of the story was at the end of that spring semester, I learned how to type, but I also learned that I like speech communication. So I
Um,
switched majors from
wow.
journalism to speech communication, and I never looked back. So that's how I got into this whole idea of speaking in public, doing analyses of speeches by famous people, uh,
Right.
dipping into popular music,
Mhm.
to figure out why is this song so memorable, or why do I hum so much or tap my toe about it.
Right.
And sometimes it's the song, sometimes it's the lyric, sometimes it's the combination of that. So that always intrigued me, and that's pretty much the center of the kind of curiosity that I have about popular discourse, public discourse, and
Right.
stuff like that. So yeah.
So you kind of reinforce something I share with my students, that no knowledge is wasted, and sometimes the road is not going to be as straightforward. That you know what your major is, you know exactly where you're going. And
Mhm.
so that's really good to know. You did mention that you were, while you were transitioning here, actually at Morgan State.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that professional part of your journey?
Yeah, yeah. So after I mentioned my three schools, some people might say, "Oh, Rodgers, you picked all your schools because of the athletics in all three." And I'm like, well, just because I went to Alabama with the history and tradition of football, and I went to Memphis where
Mhm.
the team went to the Final Four, and
Right.
then in my doctoral program, Penn State won the national championship. Ironically, the other school I was considering, Indiana, had I
Yeah.
gone there, I would have gotten my championship there too in basketball
Oh,
under Bobby Knight.
okay.
So yeah, so
Yeah.
it was just coincidence that the athletics, were the driver. But it does remind me, Dr. Dew, of what our former president, Alan Murden, said
Mhm.
when we were all there for that magic carpet ride when Mason went to the Final Four.
Right.
And there were so many people in the country that never heard of George Mason or
Mhm.
Mason basketball. So I think he said, and I'm paraphrasing, that athletics is like the front porch of the
Mm.
university. So
Right.
that is often the very first inkling that a student knows or
Yeah.
has an idea about a school. And then the
Right.
rest of it follows. Like,
Mhm.
oh, George Mason. And then you start thinking, oh, well, what kind of programs do they have? What kind
Yeah.
of, so, what's the social life there? Fraternities, sororities, cultural life. So that was kind of, my thing, with that. But after I got my PhD, my first employment was as an assistant professor in, think, get it, speech communication at Kent State University.
Okay.
And I was there for about 6, 7 years, and I got tenure there. Then I had the audacity to continue seeing my friend, my very good friend, my
Uh-huh.
very close friend,
Okay.
who lived out of state, who lived in the state of Maryland. So, as an aside, and I'm sure some of our students can appreciate this, the long distance relationship ain't a fun situation. So
Right.
here I am in northern Ohio, northeast Ohio, and my sig other was in Maryland. So, but we made it work. But at some point, love prevails. Uh, got married, but then there's that other issue. So I have a job for life at Kent State University. My
Right.
significant other, I think, either at that time had a job for life. Um, nah, I'm skipping ahead. I think no, she wasn't quite at Mason. But it's like, do I make her pull up stakes and
Hmm.
come to Ohio to be with me? And she gives
Hmm.
up her career and her life and her family just to be with
Right.
little old me? Or do I give up all of my stuff and go there? So you
Right.
see who won that battle. And it was a good battle. It was a good decision. So my next stop then, since we were married, newlyweds, and lived in Maryland, was Morgan State
Okay.
University. It was a good location because we lived in Silver Spring, Maryland. So
Okay.
for her, she was still working. She had left the University of Maryland, my wife, and was
Hmm.
working for the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission
Okay.
in Upper Marlboro. And I in Morgan was in Baltimore. So we were kind of equidistant. She had about an hour's worth of a drive to Upper Marlboro. I had about an hour's drive to Baltimore. So that was great. Then, of course, fate intervened, and she got tired of being in the public-private sector
Right.
and heard the siren song and returned to academe in the
All
form of
right.
George Mason University.
Right.
So here we are living in Maryland. My wife has a position as a tenure track professor at George Mason. So she has to make that commute from Silver Spring to, at the time, Manassas. And I'm
Right.
still making my commute um, to Baltimore. Then we decided, well, maybe we're tired of working in this apartment life. Maybe we should get
Hmm.
a house. But the same kind of issue: house where daddy is in Maryland, or house where mommy is in Virginia. Again, somebody won that battle. But the problem with that was it was great for my wife because she has a house. We have a house, in Prince William County, and 5 to 10 minutes away from the campus. I then had a 2 hour commute from
Oh, yeah.
Northern Virginia to Baltimore. That wasn't a fun commute. That was not a fun commute. So we were in that pragmatic aspect of got to find something.
Right.
Does this mean that my wife finds something or I find something? And interestingly enough, things work out that, as I mentioned early on, there was a position, an opening in this department. I must say, Dr. Do, here's the fun thing. All the years that I've known my wife,
Hmm.
I've known her discipline, recreation,
Right.
leisure studies. I
Right.
knew about what she did at George Mason. I was a little confused about, so you're in a college of education? But anyway,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
neither here nor there. But
Yeah.
but I'd always thought that if things worked out, maybe we'd be at the same school. I mean, school as in university. It
Oh.
never in my wildest dreams or nightmares would I have imagined that I
Mm.
would be at the same university in the same freaking program as
Right.
my wife. Say what you want, Dr. Do. It's a very interesting situation to be in a faculty meeting in a conference room Now I would say looking at your boo, but I won't say that. But the idea that
So
your significant other is right there. It's now, of course, as I learned from being at Mason, it wasn't that unusual because
right,
Brenda Wiggins and Dave Wiggins,
right,
I think the Caswells
right.
and the Bakers. So it wasn't that unusual, but it was sure freaking strange and odd to
For
be,
you.
yeah, because again, our disciplines were so different. I never would have imagined that in any kind of configuration we'd be in the same unit, but
Right.
there we were. So there we were. um I know, so I went a long way to go there about how the Morgan thing happened. So that's where I was, and then um hopefully hoping to get my foot in the door at Mason. I looked into the adjunct opportunities.
Hmm.
Again, adjunct opportunities in my discipline of communication. Because
All
I was
right.
thinking if I got to Mason, hey, my wife's at Mason in this RHT thing, whatever that
Right.
is, and hey,
Right.
I'll be at Mason in communication. But stranger things happen, and I end up again not just at the university, but in her same unit. So
Right.
as I said earlier, it was very interesting, not just being in that space with her, but to be surrounded by so many people who had physical education, recreation,
Right.
sport at the center of what they do. And I'm sure they're probably looking at me like, okay, what's this guy doing here?
Right.
We don't get that. But I try to be a good teammate and playmate. And I just kind of soaked up the knowledge that I needed to
Right.
adapt. So, it took me back to when I used to teach my communication students. One of the things that I would always stress was that communication, I termed it or saw it as a liberal art. And I said,
Okay.
if you're in communication, you need to learn how to learn.
Mm.
So maybe you don't know engineering, but you might be in a position to help engineers understand the public.
Right.
You can
Right.
work with them, and so you need to be able to learn and adapt. And who knew that I would take my own lessons and adapt to a sport centric, recreation centric, tourism centric environment. But
Right.
it's been great. I've thrived. I'd like to think that these areas have kind of interceded or influenced the kinds of stuff I've always been interested
Hmm.
in, with
Yeah.
criticism and my interest in sport and gender and race and culture. So it kind of all fits. It kind of all fits.
So a number of things. You
Yes.
were working towards brownie points and then you messed them up. So there
Oh
you go.
well. Oh well.
I was like, oh, he made these great decisions. No, I knew it wouldn't last. The other thing I am curious to find out about is being that you switched your major and now looked at speech communication, if I'm
Mhm.
there was the option, I'm assuming, that you could have gone into practice, right? Or not necessarily. Instead of
Um,
academia. What was there another track outside of academia that
um,
you taken?
that's it wouldn't have been journalism. Oh,
Right,
God
right,
knows. So no, I wouldn't be working for a newspaper or a
right.
television. Although some people say, "Oh, Pierre, you got that voice. You could be a radio announcer." I'm like, I guess I could, but that wasn't my thing. Um, you know, and I tell you, it's funny that you asked the question and you really make me think about it. And you're so good at that, so I commend you
Oh,
for these
thank
deep
you.
probing questions. Um, Gosh, did I want to do anything other than academia? What's interesting? My parents were both school teachers,
Okay.
and they both instilled. I know you're going to think and say, "Oh, a love of learning." Yeah, well, but they said, "Don't be a teacher." And growing up, I remember my mom sitting at the kitchen table grading and
Mhm.
with the little red pen because she was a reading specialist. So I know, and between that and the salary, I get where she was coming from. And
Right.
then to her chagrin, you're thinking about touching the future. So it's like she's proud, but it's like, oh my gosh, he's gonna be an educator. Oh, so it's like the best of times and the worst of times. And I tell you, the reason I think academia was in my future when I was an undergrad. I mentioned my major was speech communication. I was my first taste of teaching was as an undergraduate teaching
Oh,
assistant.
really?
I had taken a course in African American English, and
Mhm.
I guess I did all right in the class, so much so that the teacher says, "I want you to be my teaching assistant next year." Like, well, what? Okay, whatever that is. You get credit for it. Like, oh, okay. So other than that, I mean, it was like a glorified gopher, but I got to, I guess, be a peer instructor, to a certain extent.
Okay.
So that was kind of cool. Then I went to Memphis for my master's. You know, in communication, and this is the case at so many universities, um, public speaking or interpersonal communication, they tend to be required core courses.
Right.
And
Right.
so it's not unusual that you see an acre of students taking these kinds of courses. And of
Mhm.
course, you need people to teach them. So as a master's student, I was a grad teaching assistant.
Okay.
Now, here's the funny thing, though, about Memphis and Penn State. So, as a grad teaching assistant, it was a deal. The deal was, as a grad teaching assistant, my tuition and fees would be
Mhm.
paid.
Yes.
I would have so to be paid, that would mean I'd have to be a full-time student to take 3
Mhm.
courses each semester. But in exchange for being an assistant to teach 2 courses
Mhm.
of public speaking or something like that. Now, when I have to add, Dr. Adu, when I say I was a grad teaching assistant, that's a misnomer. I didn't
Okay.
assist. When I was an undergrad, for instance, and I took, my survey course in history from the 1865 to whatever. There
Right.
was the teacher, you went to the lecture, and then there was like maybe one day a week that you went to the grad teaching
Right.
assistant,
Yeah.
for that deal. It wasn't like that in communication. When I say I was the grad teaching assistant, I really
Mhm.
meant I was the teacher.
Of course.
So I had to do the lectures. I had to do the role in attendance.
Mhm.
I had to create the test and grade
Oh,
the test.
wow.
I had to assign the speeches and grade them. And that was a little scary
Mhm.
because when I had to finish my undergrad degree, and again, I won't go into why my undergraduate degree and I thought I was going to graduate in May, ended up being in August. And then 2 weeks later, I am in my master's program and I'm
Wow.
teaching. Yeah, that was a real scary thing. So the fact it was kind of like fight or flight, you
Mhm.
know, I'm trying to learn how to be a grad student and doing my courses and learn how to be a teacher and
Right.
teaching these 2 classes, thrown right into it in the fall, and then the same, wash, rinse, and repeat in the spring.
Yeah.
Take 3 classes, teach 2, and then I did the same thing again for the next fall and the next spring. But I guess I saw that I kind of enjoyed it. I
Right.
mean, you kind of, and it sounds weird to say it like this, but I don't know if I had a knack to do it, but apparently I wasn't scared. After I learned what I needed to learn and got my lecture notes together, I was able to, go beyond what was printed and actually, like you, to be or try to be a good teacher and a good leader and a good
Right.
listener. So
Right.
that was the thing. Then, silly me, I wanted to work on a PhD. So I went
Yeah.
straight through at Penn State. So thankfully, I had the 2 years of teaching experience, at
Right.
master's level. And I did the same thing at Penn State. So all of that time taking classes and being a grad teaching assistant, I guess really that was my track. So
Yeah.
once I finished at Penn State, well, what else am I gonna do? Hey, I guess I need my
Exactly.
first gig, and Kent State was a nice first landing spot because it wasn't that far, well, relatively. It was the next state over from Pennsylvania to Ohio, and it was about a 3 or 4 hour drive. So, I was able to, finish up what I needed to at Penn State, and that was a little bit scary too,
Hmm.
completing my the rest of my dissertation while being at a brand new place, teaching
Oh,
all
wow.
new courses and those new preps. And yeah, that was interesting. But yeah, that's pretty much how the
So,
communication aspect of it went.
so you definitely were destined to be a professor, is what I'm hearing. Whether you liked it or not. But
Well,
you had good practice, it sounds like. So that was
yeah, I'm glad you added that, whether I liked it or not. But I do think sometimes, similar to our students who do internships and practica, sometimes it's a learning experience.
that's
Sometimes
right.
it's useful to do it, try it out to see if you like it. And if you don't, it's
Absolutely.
great that you found out early and you can move on. But if it's something you really like, you really appreciate, it's like, this is it. You
Yeah.
keep doing it. So yeah, I never of it that way, but yeah, the fact that I seem it's so weird to talk about yourself in third person. I seem to have a gift, but no, I did seem to enjoy, the craft of teaching, which kind of blended into, discipline in terms of stuff that I was, interested in researching and teaching. So it all kind of fit together.
So there's a bit of a glitch in your video.
Yeah, I
But
saw something that said I was unstable, but
yeah,
that wouldn't be the
well, but I
first
think we're
time I've
good
been
to
called
go.
unstable.
I am not
You can edit
touching that.
that part out, right?
I am not touching that. So we're gonna take a bit of a swing away from the professional
Yes,
because
ma'am.
now we're getting to a bit of the personal. And so my question is hobbies.
What?
What are
What?
some of your
What?
hobbies?
Hobbies?
You know
Hobbies?
what hobbies
Okay, that
are.
means things that aren't professional. Things that wait. So things like I enjoy?
But let's clarify things that you enjoy. Yes.
Okay.
I'm
All right. I will
trying to
behave.
get me in trouble on my own show.
I know that's right. That
But
wouldn't be
I
good. That would not be good. You know, I I would think, and maybe that's like one of my little deep secrets, but maybe not so deep. Um, I've got a musical background,
oh,
so you know, especially in high school, I was high school choir and
oh, I
high
didn't
s-
know this,
and
Dr.
high
Rodgers.
school marching band, concert band. When I went to Alabama, I was in I think one of the chorales. I was in the $1 Million Band.
Hmm.
I was in the orchestra as an oboist, no less. So yeah, so I've always had that love of music. Um, in fact, at Alabama, I was a music minor with
Oh,
oboe
okay.
performance, and as much as we tell our students to look to your minors or to look at what you might want to do career wise, um, I had an instructor and my oboe instructor who would always, because at the time I was learning how to make my reeds and
Mhm.
taking individual lessons and playing the orchestra and symphonic band, blah blah blah. He was like, maybe we need to have you to go to a conservatory
Mm.
to work on this. And I tell you, Dr. Aidoo, it's like the difference between a vocation and an
Mhm.
avocation. I loved myself some music. I love playing, I love directing, I love listening to it,
Mhm.
but I didn't see myself putting in that kind of time, that kind of effort
Mhm.
into doing nothing but music. It's like that feeling of, if you do music like anything else, you can't help it. You live it,
Yeah.
you dream it, you sleep.
Mhm.
That's all you do. And especially as an undergrad, that wasn't all I did, because
Right.
obviously, because I had a major. Now, of course, I guess I could have flipped. I could say, well, maybe I'll do music instead. But then
Yeah.
it's like, oh crap, then I have to take more music theory. And that's like it's kind of like some of our students who say, maybe I'll switch majors. But oh, that means I have to take biology. Yeah, maybe not. I'll stick with what I got. So, but yeah, I do love my music. What's also interesting, and you know this because you see my office, I've got a small poster in my office that has the caption "One Field, Two Great Traditions, University of Alabama." And on one side, it's a locker room scene. On one side, it's like the Crimson Tide,
Mhm.
helmet and jersey, shoulder pads, and the other side, it's a $1 million band hat and I think some drumsticks. And
Mhm.
so I put it up there simply because, I and maybe that's partially explaining my connection with sport. I
Mhm.
No, I never played the game. No, I never played football. I never would presume that marching band was as important as the Crimson Tide winning yet another game. But I do acknowledge that my interest in music and marching was probably related to what
Yeah.
happened on the field. And so in that sense, it was a context of sport or a sport aside,
Yeah.
and that was pretty much that situation. So yeah, I like music. I like certain types of art, collecting art. So I like
Yeah.
African American art, as probably evidenced by my background with the Cynthia St. James picture with honors. So, one other thing that's related, and again, I keep harping back to my office, that place that my students never see because they won't see me, but that's neither here nor there. I have a number of eclectic interests, so and
Mhm.
collections, much like you, because I've got college logo golf balls. So I got a set of those.
Um,
I've got college logo hockey pucks. I've got college logo baseball. So I got those things there. And I also have those, what they call the Funko displays. So I've got, African American quarterbacks. I've got Jackie Robinson. But yeah, I also have Nichelle Nichols from Star Trek.
mhm.
I've got Prince. I've got so I do like these kinds of figures. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention one of my newest loves in my office. Again,
Oh,
if you knowing my office, Dr. Aidoo knows my adoration for Tina Turner. And
yes, I do.
yes, and so I do have the newest Tina Turner Barbie, who has an
Oh,
honored place on my bookshelf. So, but yeah, I bring it up because I've got a lot of stuff that I'm into. So the collection of black art, sports art,
yeah.
memorabilia. I do like my music. I do like my
Oh,
R&B. I do like my jazz. You know,
mhm.
I like, my wife chides me because I don't sing. I think the only time she gets to get that from me is at a sporting event if I sing along with the national anthem.
All
But
right.
you know, but no, but yeah, I do like my music. I do like fine arts. So yeah, I those are some of my secret hidden passions. I guess hidden no more, thanks to you.
Didn't know more. Well, good. That's what we're here to do. Unearth all the
Of
secrets.
course.
And you have mentioned your wife, and because she's an important part of our community, I need to name her. It is Associate Dean Ellen Rodgers, for those of you who may have met her.
Yes.
And we're working because I'm going to have a chat with her, and we will see what she says about some of the things you said. We will see.
Oh goodness. Can't wait for
So
that. Can't wait for that.
you have mentioned some hobbies and interests, and full disclosure, I've seen some of them, but I didn't know the part about music, so that's
Oh my
really cool
goodness.
to learn about. Um,
I kept that on the down low.
you sure did. You sure did, because I know about all the others. And students, just in case you're curious, I would suggest go check his office out. He has some cool stuff in there. Um, I know with COVID and everything, it's made being in person a little interesting, but
True, true.
so I guess as we kind of get to the end, my question to you. So
Yes.
you've had this really rich and varied experience educationally, professionally, bringing you to this point where you've been
Mhm,
here now, as you said, almost 16 years, more than 16 years. And I know with that, you've had the opportunity to work with students and, see them grow, because I know you also coordinate the practicum. So there's that
mhm,
part of the education that you're a part of. And as
mhm.
I introduced you, you are the coordinator for our grad students. So you really have had this opportunity to
Right.
interact with and, teach and mentor the whole range, right? From
This is
freshman and now to grad.
this is true.
Um, so give us some words of wisdom for our students as they are navigating this path. As you said, some of them may have fallen into
Mhm,
um, each of our programs in our school, but
mhm,
there are, of course, many others who knew from the get go they wanted to be in sport
mhm,
management, they wanted to be in recreation management, they wanted to be in hospitality tourism
mhm,
or
mhm,
events management, right? So we
mhm,
have a wonderful mix of those who either knew from the beginning
mhm.
or somehow caught up with us. What are some words of wisdom for students as they navigate through these programs and think about their future careers?
Oh goodness. I think you hit on it when you mentioned navigate, because as you said, and I'll just echo this wise woman who brought that up, where it's such a an interesting and useful mix of the students. They are very fortunate in, say, high school, that
Mhm.
they have been exposed to hospitality courses and coursework. So it's not anything that's out of the ordinary to look at an undergraduate program and, oh, here's where I'm looking for. It's this tourism and events management or hospitality and events manager, or take your pick of the title. Or I took sport business and marketing. So at least they know. But other students, as you and I both know, fall into it and fall off often in love with it.
Right.
And it's nice to have majors that are accommodating of both types of students.
Yes.
Um, I I mentioned my colleagues as and being very thankful for them and being able to work with them. But I think our students have the benefit of some very talented, very caring people.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just what's in the book or what's in Blackboard, but these are instructors that are interested in, them and
Yes.
what happens with them down the line career wise. And it's almost like ask them these questions. We're crazy that way. We'll answer them. We'll
Yes.
we'll provide inspirations or
Yes.
leads. All you gotta do is ask. And the other thing is being able to see the connections. I think all of us to a certain extent, and maybe it's necessary, that in SRTM, hey, I am a sport management major, or I am a tourism and events management major, or I'm a recreation management major. And well, as one of my colleagues likes to say, we have a tendency to silo ourselves. And again, nothing wrong with sport management. Nothing but love, nothing but love for tourism events management, nothing but love for recreation management. And each of those programs has great instructors and great courses. So, not saying anything about that, but
Right.
I think so often our students don't get the full picture.
Mm.
And it's like some of those rare instances that they get to take certain courses that they get to sit alongside folks in other programs. I know that we are talking about trying to institute some courses that literally will take advantage of all three
Right. Yes.
areas of expertise. For instance, I believe that sport management students have to do a marketing class. I
Mm-hmm.
believe recreation management students have to do a marketing class. I
Mm-hmm.
believe tourism events management students have to do a marketing class. What a novel thought. What about a class that all of three majors could be in, and we'd have time and information dedicated for all three? So they're independent, but they're interdependent. So moving forward, I'd like to see that kind of thing happening. But even if that hasn't happened yet, I would encourage our students to take those opportunities. Talk with your classmates who aren't necessarily in your major. You might
Absolutely.
come to find out that there's a lot more similarities than you ever thought that there would be. Um,
Right.
Other than listening and yeah, I know people are getting ready to cram for tests and these final papers.
Yeah.
But other than that, try to take the larger view. Because yeah, you're trying to get this stuff done and you want these grades in, and grades are important. But the bigger picture is, what do these courses have to do to help you in the long run? Some
Yeah.
courses I think you tend to like early on, and that's great. Other courses are more like a slow burn. Here I'm
Yeah.
talking about classes like research methods.
Yeah.
Um, you were talking about my wife, Dean Rodgers. I can't tell you how often we would have the same students, and she'd be so jealous because I teach them fun things, in sport communication,
Right.
or film. And she has to talk about, means, medians, and P is less than point zero. I mean, important stuff. But here's the thing. After often people graduate and they're in their positions and then their fields, they don't have to think twice about, oh crap, I need a quick survey. They
Yeah.
can whip that up,
Yep.
as opposed to, oh, let me get my assistant to do that. Now, of
Right.
course, you may have an assistant. That's nice too. But at least you've got the skill set that you can do
Right.
that sort of thing. So some courses are the slow burns. Some of the instructors that you have, I'm not going to say you hate, but you might have a situation that it might take a bit to understand and fully appreciate what they've
Mm-hmm.
done for you and how
Mm-hmm.
they've and what they've meant to you. So I would encourage all the students to have that sense of wonder, that sense of
Mhm,
being open, and not focus so much on the book stuff. Try to
mhm,
focus on the relationships with their instructors, with their classmates, and take advantage of the time that they have here at this university. Because strangely enough, those years go by very quickly.
yes, they
Literally in a blink of an eye, all of a sudden. And Dr. Adu, you and I experience this every semester when we sit in on our respective internship synthesis
mhm,
presentations. It's like, I remember you. I remember
mhm.
you when you wouldn't do any work. I remember you when you were a blabbering whatever kind of student. But look at you now, prepared, well dressed, well spoken, able to put together a PowerPoint, able to answer questions. It's, I was going to say it's like an officer and a gentleman. So, but again, that's a
Yeah.
reference that I'm sure our students like. What is this officer and a gentleman of which he speaks? But the idea of seeing that progression and seeing that growth, all of you have it. All the students that we deal with
They
have
do.
that. And, I just encourage that. And, as a final takeaway, know that we're not going anywhere. We're still here. Once you fly the coop and go off and work in industry or go off and get more schooling, we're always available. If you got questions, if you want to follow up, if you want yet another recommendation for a position or graduate school, we're here for you to do that. So don't forget us. And certainly for my students, try not to forget me. So,
Well, thank you so much, and I think you kinda have fed into where we are headed, right? We are headed into this period of gratitude, and just in general, it's easy for us to take for granted some things that we have. So I think it's great that you are reminding everyone, as faculty, as staff, we are here for you. We are dedicated to your success. And I think you really hit on a very important part, which is the relationships. Try to get to know your faculty members, and that's kind of why we're doing interviews like this to show the different other sides of faculty. Because when we enter the classroom, we're on a mission. And
yes.
the next hour and 15 minutes, or 2 hours and 45 minutes, or whatever it turns out to be,
Right. Right.
uh, we're on a mission to try and get through. But I know that I appreciate when students seek me out outside of class. And as you just pointed out, it's the same for you. And I believe it's the same for our colleagues. So, absolutely. Well, thank you so
Absolutely.
much, Dr. Rogers, for taking your time and indulging me in this conversation and sharing a little bit more about your journey for all our students and our community members. Everybody have a wonderful, wonderful holiday break. Take some time to relax, appreciate whatever or whoever. Um, do remember though, we have a few more weeks to the end of the semester, so there is that. But at least for the rest of this week, just have a wonderful week and holiday, and we'll see you in a few days, maybe next week, whatever. And thank you for listening. Thank you so much, Dr. Rogers.
Oh, it's my pleasure.